Welcome everybody to this edition of Attention Talk Video. I'm your host, Attention Coach Jeff Copper, and we're here today with David Gwerk, founder of the ADD Coach Academy. Welcome to the show, David.
Thanks, Jeff. Glad to be here as always.
And now, David is he heads up the ADD Coach Academy, which is the only accredited ADHD coaching school by the International Coaches Federation, correct?
And the Professional Association of ADD Coaches now.
That's right. That's right. And today our topic is, people are always trying to, what works for those with ADHD, but the question here today is, what doesn't work?
Wow. Well, there's three things that come to mind. First of all is pressure to perform, and pressure to perform based on other people's ideas of how you should perform, whether it's in the workplace or school. So the kid that has to sit in his chair and sit still when they're not engaged because there's a boring situation and the teacher doesn't engage them, and then they're called upon, their brain will shut down. Or pressure to do an exam or a paper because they haven't been able to learn it in their learning style. So pressure to perform and deadlines without understanding of how a person's brain works is really detrimental. And then there's this perfectionism thing.
Right, hold on, before we get to perfectionism, but there's also pressure for performance to do it the way that you're not, if you're naturally do it one way, and you're having pressure to do it another way, that also can paralyze. And I know when I coach, the first thing that we talk about is pressure, because as I say, the defense is to put pressure on the offense because it inhibits performance.
Absolutely.
And where do you put the pressure? The weakest link. And so if you're coaching somebody with AD or you have ADD, the pressure, the I just should or I just have to, by the way, those strategies, if they would have worked, they would have worked by now. But I think I like to use the sports metaphor because, again, the defense puts pressure on the offense to inhibit performance, and putting pressure on those with AD just doesn't work.
Well, and also, if the brain is working too fast, you just have to pause. That self-reflection is so important, because the pausing is what ignites all the executive function. If you can't pause, you can't pay attention. If you can't pay attention, you can't regulate your emotions and your energy. So when you put pressure on yourself, your brain's shutting down. And when you know that you're under that pressure, it's so important to pause and pay attention to your body and just take some breaths. Just take some breaths.
Now, the other one you were starting to talk about was perfectionism.
Yes. You know, a lot of people with ADHD, I've seen this, the desire to perform perfectly. They're so worried about the outcome of a performance-based action, any action, a project, anything at work, that they become so focused on the result that it'll actually cause procrastination, because they're waiting for all these things to be aligned, all these situations to be aligned to create the perfect result. And what happens is they're so worried about doing things right, they don't do anything. They don't get anything done. So we try to come up with standards of excellence, because perfectionism doesn't exist, Jeff. It's just it's this mindset that I have to do it perfectly and then I'll be considered a success. And you just have to do it to the best of your ability using your unique brain wiring.
Well, there's that old saying, done is better than perfect.
That's right. Something is better than nothing. That's right.
And the other thing I like is learning is a process that almost never ends. And if you're in business or you're writing a book or you're doing something, you can always learn to do something better. So you have to stop at some point in time and just say, hey, I got to get this thing out. Because if you wait for you to have learned it all, you're likely going to be publishing the book from your grave or whatever you're trying to do. So I know there's perfectionism. Any other things that you can think of?
Yeah, I think, Jeff, you know, you do a lot of work in this, and I think it's processing styles are so important. I mean, if you know you're a kinesthetic learner and you need movement and you're going into a boardroom, you know you just can't get up and walk around. You have to develop strategies like a squeeze ball or writing. You have to use those strategies in all the situations, and you have to use a little executive function, which means you have to think about the situation before. So a lot of times, people with ADHD don't identify the situations that get them in trouble, and they do things spontaneously. They got to prepare for it.
Well, that's interesting, because so often when I'm coaching people, I can't change you, but if we understand who you are, it's about managing your environment. And for me, what doesn't work is forcing those with ADD to try to perform in an environment that's not conducive to how they work. Environment
is so important, even to the point of too many people, claustrophobic, it's too hot, you don't have enough leg room, you can't move around. You know, you need that space, and everybody's different, and you have to understand your physical environment, but also even in the physical environment, how does your brain work? So if you've got somebody who's monotone and they're giving a class, you've got to figure out a way to make it engaging and creative, drawing mind maps, using colored pens, whatever it is. And a lot of people don't with ADHD, and then they find out, oh boy, I'm in trouble, I can't pay attention, they conk out or they leave.
Another area that I think that doesn't work is trying to force somebody with ADD just to just to live in a boring environment.
Oh my God.
Just saying that you need to learn to do this just because you have to. If it's boring, it's like nails on a chalkboard.
It is. It's exactly what it is. I mean, you put somebody in a boring environment and you ask them to pay attention. It's just like that. You can actually see people physically suffer.
Yes.
They suffer. And that's why a kid or an adult, when they're in a boring situation, they will do something impulsive or oppositional to stimulate their brain because they can't get their brains going, and it's horrible. So one of the most important things is engagement. And Nora Valco's done research. Interest.
Yep.
You have to engage people with ADHD, or else their brains are going to shut down.
Yep. I want to clarify one thing because I've been working on as we talk about interest so importantly, and interest is a piece of it, but to me there's a little bit more.
Oh,
there's a little bit of instincts and environment.
Oh, yeah.
I know those with ADHD, sometimes they can't clean their closet or whatever, but they could do it in the company of another person.
Right.
So the issue is, are they interested or are they stimulated by the other person be there in this brain stimulation? And I just make that difference because we talk about interest sometimes, but sometimes maybe brain stimulation is a better word because interest stimulates your brain, and then environmental things can too. So
well, that's right. And Jeff, anything that's interesting stimulates your brain. Doesn't mean it's necessarily good for you.
That's right.
So intention is so important.
Absolutely.
Very important.
So David, thank you very much for coming on. I think those are the key things don't do or focus on because they can really paralyze those with ADHD. So part of sometimes moving forward is not always knowing what to do, but what not to do is key.
That's right.
So David, thanks again for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me, Jeff.
All right.
Yep.
Thanks again, everybody.